Ken Fisher, arguably one of the most successful investors on the planet, the Fisher Investments founder and chairman. Ken, oddly enough, I do want to go into this with this Trump trial stuff, if you don't mind, because it is a drama unfolding. And Charlie Gasparino is right. There could be a conviction or two to come out of it. And yet it could possibly not impact Donald Trump at all. He gets elected all the same. Markets are happy. Voters, majority of them in this case, if that happens, would be happy. What do you make of all that?
Well, first, thanks for having me on again, Neil. Second, who am I to argue with Gasparino? I respect him greatly.
Really? That last part surprises me, but go ahead.
I'm always trying to surprise you, Neil. You know that.
Go ahead.
Third, as I've said to you before, the makeup and the split between the popular vote in America and the electoral college split, where you don't get anything extra in all but two tiny states for getting a little more, means that in the swing states, you could be a good 2% behind in the popular vote and you'll still win the swing states. And you can see that if you look at the difference between national right now and the polling in the swing states, either at the great website 270 to Win, which in my mind is currently the best website extant for looking at politics at the granular level, or at the polling at realclearpolitics.com, which is a great place for looking at polling. But the fact is, those other questions that you ask, like, could he end up as president and in jail? It seems to me that's becoming elected president is one thing. Becoming president, being put in jail is another push, because I think at one level, the Supreme Court would end up saying, you know what we're going to do? We're going to let him stay his jail time until after he's president. I just don't see us trying to hobble a president of the United States that's duly elected through the Electoral College.
That's very interesting. Let me get your take then on the markets. Not long ago, on this network, you had said it's a bull market, just enjoy it. And you were saying that in the middle of a swoon going on. We've kind of unswooned today, notwithstanding. It's day by day. But what has you still bullish?
So, I've studied this, and it turns out stocks are volatile. And you got a lot of good down moves in big up years. And the reality is all the same stuff that I've said to you for quite a long time remains true. The fact is, election years are bullish on U.S. stocks. The fact going back to 1925 is the election years on average are positive 83% of history with 11% return. Every time since the bottom of the Great Depression in 1932, when we've had a negative second year like we had in 2022, the fourth year's been positive 100% of the time with average returns 15.7%. The fact is also years where there's a Democrat incumbent tend to be more front-end loaded than years where there's a Republican incumbent, despite the fact that the overall average returns for the two aren't very different. And so that helps explain the fast start to the year. Most people believe that the Republican tends to be more pro-business, anti-regulatory. I think the Democrats more pro-regulatory, big government-oriented. So, my view is you got a little volatility that goes on in the course of a year. Why would that be surprising? I note that the media likes to say right now, this is the worst month since October. And then I say, which October are you talking about? Because
it was just last October, right. Yeah.
But actually the bottom of the market was October 22. And it's been a great period since October 22.
No, you're absolutely right about that.
Even though we've got some volatility along the way.
Now, you stood out in the crowd by saying, even though there's this fixation on the Magnificent Seven and technology, maybe it's disproportionately technology, you pointed out and had stats to prove it, that is not the case. So it had me thinking maybe my friend Ken Fisher isn't keen on technology, but then I was looking at some of your investments, and you're hardly a tech Luddite. I mean, you like Adobe, AMD, Salesforce, ASMC. I guess they make equipment that handles chips. It's way over my knowledge base. Taiwan Semiconductor. So they might not be Magnificent Seven stocks, but they certainly are technology. So you do ride this technology wave, right?
So I've been heavy in technology, since the beginning of this bull market and before. But the reality is what I think happens in this year as it progresses is like a toggle switch, not an on-off switch. We move more and more toward value, particularly led by energy, and more toward a broadening. Now, that's predicated on my view that the economy will continue at the GDP level to be somewhat irregularly stronger than most people think, which is challenged right now by the fact that the first quarter GDP initial release was weaker than people thought. But I think that'll take care of itself as the year moves along, and we'll see as the economy appears to be stronger than people expected, more emphasis on the value side, which has a lack of the quality that the growth side has, which is that it can grow when the economy is not much growing.
Ken, when you were last with me, I don't want to misquote you, but you were talking about this obsession with the Federal Reserve, whether it's going to cut rates. The environment suddenly got pushed back the last time we chatted. Now people are saying, we're only going to have 2 cuts this year. Now it's down to none, possibly. But you said that the Fed doesn't need to cut rates for stocks to soar. So you still stand by that?
Oh, sure. Let me just point out that the Fed was raising rates well after the bottom of the market in October 2022. And at 75 beeps at a crack.
That's right.
And the fact is, none of that stopped the bull market from going. The market's a forward-looking thing, and the other feature right now that all the U.S. Fed-phobic folk focus on is that inflation is stickier than they feared, or than people feared, or than someone feared. I want to point out, I always say, think global first. And the reality is, if you look particularly at Europe, but overseas in general, inflation is falling faster than people thought. And Americans don't much seem to notice that. We also suffer from this real reality, which is that we tend to want to think that inflation's going on as long as prices don't reverse to where they were before. But we don't reverse prices in Western culture. We just stop the future rate of inflation.
Could I ask you a personal question on, I know you're a graduate of the California State Polytechnic University. I don't know if you had back then in your day what we're seeing on college campuses today, and it seems to be rampant. These protests are just popping up everywhere. I think we're more than 2 dozen right now. How do you feel about those, and whether parents who look at that and fork over good money for their kids' education are seeing that?
So A and B. First, I was a public school kid, as you point out, but I did not graduate from Cal Poly Humboldt. I went to Humboldt State College, and the day before I graduated, they made it Humboldt State University. So I graduated from university I never attended. And then, more recently, they made it Cal Poly Humboldt, so people would think I graduated from Polytechnic University I never attended. I'm not that technical. But the fact is, said simply, as people I think would have read, Cal Poly Humboldt has been shut down by protesters who took over 2 buildings that I remember well from when I was young, but actually just today they've cleared them out. But the campus is still shut down, locked down. Okay. And Arcata, as a college town, has always been a wingnut town. I mean, when I say that, that's false. It's been a wingnut town since just about the time I was there. I don't think I caused it, but just about the time I was there.
All right, you're one of the kids who did good. All right, Ken, very good catching up. I did want to pick your brain on that. What's going on around the country?
Thanks
good
for
seeing
having
you.
me. Oh.
Ken Fisher.